This is Brother Yashamar from the JMS Atlanta camp. All praises, all glory, all honor to Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai Ba'Shem Kakadash. Double honor to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, who rule and teach well. This video is going to be going into the tribe of Levi, so hopefully we get some edification on it. Now, when we go into these tribes, right, we read from Genesis 49 and Deuteronomy 33. And so as we go through this video, there's going to be a reference of Simeon because Simeon is also mentioned alongside Levi. But I'm not gonna go too much into Simeon. I'll make a video for Simeon. This is gonna be strictly for Levi. Okay. So I've got some history. I've got some presets pulled up. Got them pulled up right here on the tabs up top. So we just gotta go through these. So Yahweh Ratazah. This is edifying. And let's go ahead and jump straight into it. So this is Deuteronomy 18 verse 1. It says, the priests, the Levites, and all the tribe of Levi shall have no part nor inheritance with Israel. They shall eat the offerings of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua made by fire and his inheritance. Now, first and foremost, who are the Levites? Well, the Levites today are the so-called Haitians. All right, and what we just read here is that the Levites didn't get land, right, amongst the tribes when they were being separated amongst themselves. Right? Why? Because the responsibility of the Levites was the work of the temple. All right, that's very important for us to understand that. Okay, because as we go through this overview of who the Levites are, we are going to see exactly how downtrodden they are. They are, of all the 12 tribes, Levi is the poorest of them all. And why is that? Because Levi, the Levites were the ones that were in charge of making intercession for the tribes of Israel to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Let me say that. Let me say it like this. Just as much as there is no salvation for us without Yahweh Shai and understanding who he is, right? Because what did Yahweh Shai do? He did the ultimate sacrifice so that we could be brought together back to the Most High, right? So without Yahweh Shai, there is no salvation. Well, prior to Yahweh Shai, right, it was the Levites who basically had the position or the response or the task of Yahweh Shai, because they would be the ones that would go into the Holy of Holies. They would be the ones that would make the sacrifice offerings, right? One day out of the year, the Day of Atonement, they had a very big responsibility, and that was making this offering up a sacrifice for the tribes of Israel so that their sins would be forgiven, so that Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai could continue to be in the temple, in the Holy of Holies. All right, I don't mean to be long-winded, but we have to understand how important this tribe was. I mean, all the tribes play a role, but the Levitical priesthood, they were the ones who Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai spoke directly to, man. All right, so now with that understanding, we're gonna go ahead and get into the name of Levi, which is Layah, and that definition means joined to me. And, joined to me how? Because, again, Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, of the 12 tribes, he chose Levi to be joined unto him by, fulfilling the responsibilities of the temple. All right. Now, I got some imagery of, so-called Haitians, which, as we will see, they are the tribe of Levi. Okay. And through the Spirit, we will be able to see this because the Levites were very spiritual, all right? And so even though we discontinued from who we were, right, according to Jeremiah 17, verse 4, we can see certain qualities, certain personality traits within the tribes that we can identify them for who they are, okay? So now let's also get Simeon, which is Shamawan, all right? It's got the word Shammai and then one. So Shammai one, which means affliction heard. And I'm going to bring Simeon up. Again, I'm not going to go too much into Simeon because they're going to get their own video. But I want to show you who the Simeonites are. They are the so-called Dominicans of today, and they are a darker skinned people. All right. Now let's go ahead and pull up the map because this map is going to be, is going to play a role into understanding who the tribe of Levi and who the Simeonites are. All right. So first and foremost, we see here the island of Hispaniola. Now, um, the island of Hispaniola, just for some quick background, was originally conquered by Christopher Columbus, because we know that Second Ezra 13 around the 40th verse talks about how the ten tribes, the northern kingdom, after the Assyrian captivity, went into another land, right? Well, that other land is the Americas, but they first started off in Hispaniola. Then from Hispaniola, they went into South America, and then from South America, they traveled up to Mexico, and then to the Americas and Canada. So, with that history, first, prior to the Southern Kingdom coming, the Northern Kingdom, which are the Simeonites, they were already here in the island of Hispaniola. All right, and and then came Christopher Columbus, and he named it the island of Hispaniola. Later on, through the transatlantic slave trade, because we know that the Southern Kingdom was scattered after 70 A.D. Well, really BC 50. The Southern Kingdom was starting to migrate into the northern parts of Africa, but um, through the transatlantic slave trade after 70 A.D., the Southern Kingdom, which was still left in Jerusalem, right? Because again, the Northern Kingdom had already gone into captivity, and the Southern Kingdom stayed back, later on to be conquered by the Babylonians, and then through 70 A.D. When Jerusalem was sacked and the temple was destroyed, the Southern Kingdom, which were Benjamin, Judah, and Levi, escaped into the northern parts of Africa, and then from Africa they ended up in Haiti because they were part of the transatlantic slave trade. And as we're going to read into it, you will see that Haitians, the Levites, actually made up 40% of the transatlantic slave trade. All right? That's a lot. And why did they do that? Because scripture says, to whom much is given, much is required, right? The Levites had the responsibility of the temple, and they went off. And so they got a very harsh judgment to this day, man, as we are going to get into. All right, so now that we have some kind of a background history, going back onto this map, we see Haiti on the left side, right, which it's going to be north west side, and then we see the Dominicans on the east side, on the east side. Now, well, let's get some more history here. After the Spaniards took the island of Hispaniola, later on the French would come and ultimately take this half of the island of Hispaniola. Okay, and the Spanish would keep the eastern part. All right, so now we have the background history. Now let's go ahead and get into the scriptures. All right, Genesis 49, and we'll start at verse 1. And Salakia, if I repeat myself, this is probably like the third time I'm trying to record this message. Something just keeps coming up. But so please bear with me. So first and foremost, we'll get Genesis 49, which is where we go to get the understanding on the tribes, and also Deuteronomy 33. That's also where we go. Now, let's get verse 1. Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Now, Jacob gathered all of his sons, which are the 12 tribes of Israel, and he was telling them this is what's going to happen when? In the last days. So this is a prophetic chapter, because we know that we were scattered according to Deuteronomy 28, right? That we were scattered through the four corners of the world. And so through the Spirit, Jacob was prophesying, and he was identifying the tribes of Israel, all right, in the last days. And we are in those last days, because technically the last day started when Yahushua came, but even now, furthermore, we are in those last days, because according to Matthew 24, I think around the 14th verse, says that this gospel shall be preached, and then the end shall come, we are in those last days. All right. So let's go ahead and get into it. It says Genesis 49 verse 5. It says Simeon and Levi are brethren. Now that's why I started off with the map, because when you go to the map, it shows you that Simeon and Levi, although they are both from different kingdoms, right? Because Simeon is from the northern kingdom, and Levi is from the southern kingdom. All right, though they are from different kingdoms, they would dwell amongst each other. So, all right, and the next verse is going to go further into that. All right, and also too, let's let's not forget that these are northern and southern kingdom, and we are going to see as we go through some history that the curses are still upon these two. All right, let's go back to the precept here, to the verse here. It says Genesis 49 5. It says instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. So what's that going into? Well, Simeon and Levi um, are both very heavy in voodoo. Levi is very heavy in voodoo, and Simeon is very heavy in Santeria, or in Spanish, brujeria. All right, and these are those instruments of cruelty. And this is why I said at the beginning of the video too, is that even though we were scattered and we lost our heritage, right? There are certain traits, because again, the Levites were a very spiritual people, but what did they do? They used their gifts now for voodoo. All right, and the Haitians, they were a very, like, if you've ever been around Haitians, especially in like a party setting or a club setting, they have like a somewhat of an energy around them. All right, and now it's that a lot of that energy goes to what they practice, goes to this voodoo, but that energy at one point, prior to Jeremiah 17:4 coming to pass, that energy was a very spiritual, very spiritual and righteous attribute. That's why they were the ones. Well, why? Because they were the ones that supped with Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, when they were fulfilling the responsibilities of the temple. But again, these are the instruments of cruelty that they have used, for that they have used their gifts for idolatry. All right. Now, furthermore, it says cruelty are in their habitations. Now, when it goes into habitations, that's twofold, because not only let me pull up the map. Not only is the habitation their place where they dwell, right, which is that's what habitation goes into. Not only is the voodoo and Santeria very heavy here in these islands, but also what's the word, habitation also goes into them as a household, them, because you have Haitians and Dominicans, like even in Miami, that as a family, that's what they practice. So that word habitation, you know it really is twofold. All right. So let's continue on. It says 49 verse 6. It says, O my soul, come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly mine honor be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self will they dig down a wall. Now, when Jacob is saying, "O my soul, come not into their secret, and unto their assembly, my honor be not thou united," this is Jacob praying that that the tribes would stay away from their secret. That we would stay away from their voodoo, from their witchcraft, because that's really what their secret is, man. They are both very heavy in witchcraft. All right, that's what that's going into. Um, and then furthermore, it says, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self will they dig down a well. Now that's going into the history of when their daughter, of when their sister Dinah was great. I could have sworn I had that pulled up. It was in Genesis 34. Let's get that Salakia into water for the patient. I try to have these things pull up. I know it's a couple seconds, but um, I try to get through these here. Genesis 34, but if you and the young man 25, yeah. Genesis 34 and 25, right here. It says, "And it came to pass on the third day when they were sore that the two sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males." So that's what that second part is going into. And also again, through through the spirit, man, these because these Asians, nowadays, in their office they call themselves, Zos. And these are a very, very violent and very like very angry people, very angry gang. All right. So again, that's why I said earlier too. Even though we don't understand who we are, there are some personality traits, man. Because what's the backstory here? That their sister was raped, and they told the heathens to circumcise themselves, and while they were weak, they slaughtered them all, man. And so we see those attributes today with the so-called Haitians, man. All right, let's continue on. It says, verse 7, "Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and shatter them in Israel." All right, and so now when it says, that it's going, that they would be divided, it, that's again, that's twofold. That's twofold because here they are divided. They're on the same island, but they're divided. Not just that, but we'll go into. Thought I had that one. I know I got that one pulled up. Yeah, Deuteronomy 28 and 54. "So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave." Now, there's a lot of strife between the Haitians and the Dominicans, all right, as we are going to get into, and that fits those curses because, as I mentioned earlier, and as we know, you know, um, these are different kingdoms, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, and we just went into those curses that their eye should be evil towards their brother. We just don't get along, man. All right, especially Haitians and the Dominicans. All right, so what's the next tab I got? We'll get this right here. Yeah, Haiti's history. Okay, so it says it transitioned from Spanish to French rule. All right, we already went over that. It says becoming no. Okay, right. So first it was called Hispaniola, right? Which that's what that entire island was called. But then it got divvied up by the French, and it was known as Saint Santo Domingo, right? This area developed into a highly profitable French colony, heavily reliant on enslaved African labor to produce sugar and other crops. All right, so now we see how the so-called Haitians fit the curses because they were colonized, right? They were colonized by the French, which we know the French are Edomites. Okay, it says right here it says that the French colony was heavily reliant on enslaved African labor. Now it says African, but some of them were African, right? Because the Southern Kingdom did go hide amongst the Africans, right? So-called Africans. But we know that this is talking about the Southern Kingdom too. It says to produce sugar and crops. The brutal conditions of slavery eventually led to the Haitian Revolution, which resulted in Haiti's independence from France in 1804, making it the first free black republic. Now, we're gonna let's go ahead and get this here. It says so Christopher Columbus landed, claimed it Hispaniola. We already got that part, and of course, the Spanish exploited the indigenous people going into Simeon, right? French colonization, as Spanish shifted focus, French buccaneers began to inhabit the western part of the island. Under French rule, Santo Domingo became incredibly wealthy, primarily through the production of sugar and other crops on large plantations utilizing enslaved African labor. Now, that's going into the transatlantic slave trade. Now, I'm pretty sure that we're gonna get the historical facts on this, but I believe it was like 60% of the coffee in France and 40% of the sugar was brought to the French through the transatlantic slave trade through the Haitians, right? Specifically, let's get some more priests. Let's get Deuteronomy 33. Because what I want to do is I want to get the precepts, and then after we get the precepts, after we get the verses identifying who they are, then we'll start to go into the history after we would have read these verses, and then we'll see how they fit in, all right? So, Deuteronomy 33, verse 8, it says, "And of Levi he said, let thy Thummim and thy Urim be with thy Holy One, whom thou didst prove at Massah, and with whom thou didst strive at the waters of Meribah." Okay, so there's two parts that I'd like to bring out in this verse. When the scripture says, "Let thy Thummim and thy Urim be with thy Holy One," again, this goes back to what I started off with. It goes back to the duties of the Levites. Thummim and the Urim, were part of were part of the responsibilities that the Levites had in the temple. Okay, and then further, and then the second point that I want to bring out in this precept is when it says, "And with whom thou didst strive at the waters of Meribah." This is going into the Haitians, as we just read, revolting and getting their independence from the French, okay, through the Haitian Revolution. Now, I'm going to say this. Well, no, I'm not. I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going. Deuteronomy 33, verse 9, it says, "Who said unto his father and to his mother," okay, so this is still talking about Levi, "who said unto his father and unto his mother, I have not seen him, neither did he acknowledge his brethren, nor knew his own children, for they have observed thy word and kept thy covenant." So, what's this going into? Well, this is giving us the history, but it's also showing you the personality trait of the Levites. All right, this is going into the history of when the people started going off, when Moses was up on the mount. Um, boom, where you at? 34 should be Exodus. Where you at, Exodus? Right, yeah, Exodus. So where just for some context to get the understanding on that precept, when Moses was at the mount with Yahweh, and the people started to worship the cattle, this is what Moses said. It says, it's Exodus 32 and 26. It says, "And Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, Who is on Yahweh's side? Let him come unto me." And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. So this is that spiritual zeal that the Levites had. Okay, and he said unto them, "Thus saith Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, God of Israel, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from the gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor." So that's what that's going into on that verse 9. When it says, "Neither did he acknowledge his brethren," it's bringing up the history that because the Levites, and because the the Levites' zeal for Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, that he didn't know his own brethren. He didn't care. He slew them. All right. It says, "For they observed thy word and kept thy covenant," man. So this was a very special, very important tribe, man. All right. And we'll start to get into the curses here. Let's get verse 10. It says, this is Deuteronomy 33 and 10. It says, "They shall teach Jacob thy judgments, and Israel thy law. They shall put incense before thee, and whole burnt sacrifice upon thine altars." All right, so going into them being the intercessors for Israel. You know, the Levites were the ones that made the intercession for the 12 tribes, man. They were the equivalent of Yahushai before Yahushai came. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. I'm just saying that they were the connection. They were the connection that the tribes had, man. They were a very important people. And as I said earlier, we're gonna get into the curses because when you understand, when we understand the importance of the tribe of Levi, we see how much they fell, man. Because kind of like the big brother, you know. Well, I think I had mentioned it. You know, to whom much is given, much is required, man. Like, he had a big responsibility, and for that, and because he went off, you know, and they're still going off, by the way. Um, you know, they are the most trodden down under of the tribes, man. I mean, Haiti's consistently getting hit by earthquakes, by floods, right? Which I mean, the let's see, 2010. I think I might even have that pulled up. Voodoo, definite no. 2010 Haiti earthquake, economic setback. Let's just see what Google tells us, because we all know about this. You know, that Haiti, that earthquake in Haiti. I mean, right here it says it caused a massive economic setback to the already impoverished nation. Damages and losses were estimated at 7.8 billion, equivalent to 120% of Haiti's 2009 GDP. Whoa. This is unprecedented devastation, crippled the government's ability to respond to the crisis and left the economy struggling to recover for years. Wow. The damages sustained, to repair the damages, they would have to basically do what they did in gross domestic product plus another 20% of that. Wow. And that again, to whom much is given, much is required. Because what does let's get Amos 3 and 6, right? Because all of that was judgment, man. Amos 3 and 6, it says, shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? Shall there be evil in a city, and Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai has not done it? That earthquake, that was a major setback. That's judgment from the Most High, and Haiti continues to get hit. I mean, their economy is freaking slaughtered. Let's get one more precept. Isaiah 40, right? Isaiah 40. I create evil. Create evil. KJV. Fat fingers. The water for the patience. Isaiah 45 and 7. Salakia. Isaiah 45 and 7. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, do all these things. I bring that up because it says right here the damages. It says this unprecedented devastation. Yeah, it was unprecedented to them, but with the understanding, you know, we know that this was sent directly from Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, man. So let's continue. Let's get some more. I got the definition of law here just for you know, just to try to cross all the T's here, because we know that the word, we know that the name Levi is La Yah, and that's where the word law comes from. Okay, La La Yah, right? It says law, the system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members, and which it may enforce by the imposition of penalties. La Yah. The word law comes from La Yah. All right, and what was that system and rules? It was the law, statutes, and the commandments, man. All right. I think I have one more thing. I had the Santeria dolls. It came to pass on third day. We already got that. Genesis 35. Let's see. Exodus 32. Put every man. Oh, we got that. And we got the precept about his eye being evil towards his brother, because there is. Let's go ahead and get that. I think I might have even had that already. Right here. It's right here. Okay. It says So this is the Wikipedia. It says Dominican Republic and Haiti relations are the diplomatic relations between the Dominican Republic and the Republic of Haiti. All right, now we have a map here, which, by the way, a little bit of my OCD really hates this map, because why would you have the orange? Why would you have Haiti on the left side, but then put it right here on the right side, man? Like, it may be my OCD, or it may be Esau trying to just put some more confusion, man. Look at that. Like, come on, man. Do better. But let's continue. It says, relations have long been hostile due to substantial ethnic and cultural differences, historic conflicts, territorial disputes, and sharing the island of Hispaniola, right? As we read in Genesis 49, they are brothers. Don't come near their habitations. They share that island of Hispaniola, man. And it's not about cultural differences, man. Because they're they're from the tribes of Israel. Those the reason that their tensions are strained is ultimately goes back to those curses. The eye shall be evil towards the brother, man. What's the other scripture? Judah shall not vex Ephraim, and Ephraim shall not curse Judah. There's there's on top of the 12 tribes not getting along with each other. There's even more division between the northern and the southern kingdom, man. There's just a consistent attack. You know, even as for those that grew up on the West Coast, like in California, man, the so-called blacks and so-called Hispanics, they don't get along, man. And that's what that's going into. All right, but let's continue reading. It says, the living standards in the Dominican Republic are considerably higher than those in Haiti. The economy of the Dominican Republic is 10 times larger than that of Haiti. The migration of impoverished Haitians and historical differences have contributed to the long-standing conflicts. Man, so Haiti is in a much worse position than the Dominican Republic, man. And we're gonna get into the history of that, man. Just to show you that they fit the curses. All right. Let's see here. We already got this history here. Battles began. The distinction. Okay, we're not gonna get into that. This is just the history which I mentioned about the Spaniards coming in first, and then the French coming in. And that's yeah. So Deuteronomy 28 verse 49. It says, "The Most High Yahweh Shem Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flies, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand." Now, we use this precept, to bring up, first and foremost, 70 A.D., right? Because those Edomites have always used the eagle as their symbol, right? But you know, who do they represent? They are the Edomites, and the Spaniards and the French are Edomites also. All right, and so we use this chapter and this verse to show you the curses of the children of Israel. And lo and behold, you know, you know, both of these people were taken over by the Spanish and the French, man, by the so-called Edomites. So, this is just proof that shows us that they really are under the curses, man, and that's how we identify the 12 tribes. All right, because again, the Levites got taken over by the French, and the Simeonites got taken over by the Spanish. Okay, so now let me see what else I had here. It says Haitian. Okay, now furthermore, going into the curses, and showing you that the Haitians are Israelites. What's the next curse? It says let's get he shall lend to you. He shall lend. He shall lend. I think I got it right. 28 and 44. It says, "He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and that shall be the tail." Now, these are part of the curses, right? That the 12 tribes of Israelites would be, caught up in bondage, financial bondage too. The book of Baruch goes into that. We are subject to payments. And then I want to get one more precept too. It says, he that le- he that borrows is slave to the lender. Let's get that. The water for bearing with me. Proverbs, the rich rules right here. Proverbs 22 verse 7. It says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." So now, I got those precepts to show you that the Haitians, the Levites, are under those curses, because as we, this is what Esau does too. Because we just read about. Let's see, what did we read about here? Right here, which resulted in Haiti's independence from France in 1804. See, this is what Esau does, man. He tries to hide the truth, man, even through AI, because if you read this, you would think, oh yeah, they got their independence, but they don't tell you why they got their independence or how. All right, so now we're gonna get into it. All right, let's get Haitian independence. Okay, well, let's go ahead. Basically, as we well, let's just read this and then it should bring out the points. It says the Haitian independence that involves an 1825 agreement between Haiti and France that included France demanding an indemnity of 100 million francs in 5 annual payments of 30 million to be paid in Haiti in claims over property, including slaves, that was lost through the Haitian Revolution in return for diplomatic recognition. Let me dumb that down, and I don't mean any offense because this is confusing to these big words can sometimes be confusing to us. Okay, so basically, we know that that the Haitians were the slaves of the French. Okay, the French built their fortunes on the backs of the Haitians, and the Haitians got tired of it and they rebelled. All right. Matter of fact, I could have sworn I had an article on that too, man. Yeah, I could have sworn I did. But y'all can look it up, man, because it's very similar to the Maccabean revolt, man. All right, because what did the Maccabees do? Which by the way, the Maccabees they were also uh, of the Levitical bloodline. But what did they do? Is they revolted, and that's what the Haitians did. All right, so let's go back to this article here because I want to give the explanation here. Basically, after they revolted against the French and they got their independence, what did the French do? They say, "Hey, because you revolted and because you now we're not your slave master, you have to pay us 150 million francs because we basically lost property that you stole, property that they colonized, right? And then it says including slaves. Now check this out, because Esau tries to hide this shit because they make it seem like we just lost property, including slaves. Um, French indemnity payment. Majority of it was for slaves and not property because property was slaves were property. But I'm trying to show here that the majority of the hundred because how did they come up with this $150 million figure? Because they said that they lost the property, but do you know that the like I think like 60% of that 150 million was valued um upon the slaves. So the value of a slave is what they were basically charging them for. I mean, think about that. They were saying you freed yourself, so you got to pay me $150 million because about 75 million of that was what I could have made off of you. That's fucking crazy. And again, that shows you that these Haitians are under the curses. And so, what did they do? It says Haiti was forced to take a loan for the first 30 million, and in 1838, France agreed to reduce the remaining debt to 60 million to be paid over 30 years, with the final payment paid in 1883. However, the New York Times estimates that because of other loans taken to pay off this loan, because the Haitians had to get a loan to pay the French to pay off the French's loan so that the French could basically, what did it say here? So that they could give them diplomatic recognition. So that they could basically say, all right, we'll leave you alone. Subject to payments, man. It says they approximated that in total 112 million francs was paid in indemnity, which when adjusted for the inflation rate would be 560 million in 2022, but considering that if it had been invested in the Haitian economy instead, it could be valued at 115 billion dollars. And these people knew that because they were again 60% of the coffee was coming from Haiti. 40% of the sugar was coming from Haiti. So if I mean think of it as a business, and I hate to sound so cruel, but that's how these Edomites looked at it. They said, okay, if so if you have a business that is making up 50% of it's selling 50%. Like all all of your candy bars are being eaten by 50% of America. Wouldn't you want to invest 150 million on like distribution or advertisement? Right? Why? Because you're already locked in a good business deal and you're making money. But what did they do? Hey, we're not going to invest it in you. We need you to pay us. That would kill any business, man. Because if they would have invested it, the Haitian economy would have been valued at 115 billion, man. But they did it, man. That's crazy. Um, let's get here. It says despite several despite several revolutions. Okay, right here. Let's continue reading. It says restoration. France's demand of payments in exchange for recognizing Haiti's independence was delivered to the country by several French warships in 1825, 21 years after Haiti's declaration of independence. Despite several revolutions in France after that date, successive governments, be they imperial, monarchist, or republican, continued enforcing the debt and coercing Haiti to pay. Now, so let me get the let me give the overview on that. So basically, when the French send this document uh, of the loan that had to be paid off, they sent it with like 40 ships with cannons pointed at the land of Haiti, basically saying, "Sign this, or else we're gonna start letting loose on these cannons." And this signature is gonna we're gonna leave you alone, but you gotta pay us 150 million francs. That's how they got that deal, man. And then furthermore, even when the French was going through their own civil war, which is that's exactly what it was, right? A civil war. Even when they were fighting amongst each other, and they didn't know who was in charge, they still made the Haitians pay, man. That's how fucked off these people are. That even while they're killing themselves, they still have to impose their law on you, man. Which that goes into Wisdom of Solomon too, right? Their strength is the rule of law. It says even after the indemnity was paid, Haiti had to continue paying the other loans, and the government of the United States funded the acquisition of Haiti's treasury in 1911, and in 1922 the rest of Haiti's debt was moved to be paid to American investors. Amalek. You know, the New York Times states that it took until 1947 for Haiti to finally pay off all the associated interest to the National City Bank of New York, which is now Citibank. In 2016, the Parliament of France repealed the 1825 Ordinance of Charles X, though no reparations have been offered by France. But the fucking Amalekites got the reparations by the Germans. These deaths have been denounced by some historians and activists as responsible for Haiti's poverty today. Of course it is. In the case of odious debt. Now, I want to I want to stop here and say and make this point here. Haiti paid their debt from in 1947. That's 125 years roughly of paying their debt, and they did it. All right. But had they not done it, because Haiti did default. When you go into the history, they did default. And when they defaulted, when they couldn't make payments, man, fucking French were on their ass. But I want to bring this out because America hasn't paid their fucking loans. Their fucking national debt is at what? It's trillions and trillions. But yet, they force these laws. They force these laws on, you know, on the world that they themselves cannot even adhere to, man. That's why these people are the devil. And it says that these debts have been denounced, man. It's called odious debt. Now, let's go into the history here. All right. It says Santo Domingo, now Haiti, was the most profitable and productive European colony in the world. Going into the 1800s, France acquired much of its wealth by using slaves. Of course it did. With the slave population of Santo Domingo alone accounting for 40% of the entire Atlantic slave trade by the 1780s. Again, the Haitians made up 40% of the Atlantic slave trade. Why? Because they had fallen short, man. Again, to whom much is given, much is required. It says between the years of 1697 and 1804, French colonists brought 800,000 West Africans slave to what was then known as Santo Domingo to work in the vast plantations. The Santo Domingo population reached 520,000 in 1790 and of those 425,000 were slaves. Wow. The mortality rate among slaves was high, with the French often working slaves to death and transporting more to the colony instead of providing necessities, as it was cheaper. It was cheaper for them to ship more slaves in than for them to give you guys than for them to give health care or take care of them, man. That's why these people gotta go, man. The fact that they did the math and said, hey, you know what? It'll cost us 20,000 a year, but if we just get some more, slaves, it'll cost us 5,000, and they let that shit ride, man. See, Esau doesn't get the hatred he needs, man. At the time, goods from Haiti comprised 30% of French colonial trade. Its sugar represented 40% of the Atlantic market. By the 1770s, more than 60% of the coffee consumed in Europe came from the French West Indies, primarily from Santo Domingo. I mean, that's pretty much. I mean, I think that's all that I had for this. Receive with great fear, rejection. Um, y'all can go into the history. I don't want to be too long. But oh yeah, I want to show this image. So this is the image of that loan, 150 million francs. But I wanted to show this image right here. I want to show these images right here. Look at this engraving showing Haitian President Jean Pierre Boyer. Now this is a Levite man, which brings up even a man and his heritage, even a man and his heritage. What is that? Heritage KJV. They covered fields. They take them by violence. Micah 2 and 2. And they covered fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. Now I bring that up because did they not oppress this man? This is a Israelite man, and his name is Jean Pierre Boyer, man. That's crazy. That ain't no John Pierre, man. With an inkwell, quill, and scroll in his right hand, ready to sign the ordinance. To the left of him in the background, this is the part that I wanted to get. French sailors can be seen on the Port au Prince dock making sure the ordinance is signed. Yeah, how? Because they had ships, man. He didn't want to sign this, man. It was an ultimatum. You got 40 warships with cannons pointed at you. You either sign this or we leave you alone, or we're going to start blowing. But you wouldn't know that unless you went into the history. You would see this and be like, oh yeah, this was something that he wanted to do. Look at him, he's damn near smiling. No, man. Check out this image right here. A French taking the chains off of the Levites, man. It's crazy, but I think I had one more piece. Well, shoot, Salakia. I didn't mean to be so long-winded on this message, but let's continue to get the edification. What I had there. We'll end off with Malachi 2, because it basically summarizes what we just went over. So Malachi chapter 2, starting at verse 1, it says, and now, O ye priests, this commandment is for you. Now, we know that the Levites were the priests. It says, if you will not hear, and if you will not lay it to heart, to give glory unto my name, saith Yahweh Shem Yahushai of hosts, I will even send a curse upon you, which we just got some of those curses. The borrowing, being plundered from a nation whose tongue we did not know. It says, and I will curse your blessings. Yeah, I have cursed them already, because you do not lay it to heart. We have to understand that ultimately, this year's going into the Levites, but we are all priests now, right? That's what we're called. We're called the holy priesthood. We have to understand that these curses came upon us because we went off, man. Behold, I will corrupt your seed and spread dung upon your faces, even the dung of your solemn feast, and one shall take you away with it. Now, that's it's fucked up, but it's true. That dung, Hades, eat. I mean, that's what that's going into, man. That Haitians, ate mud pies, man. Yes, some impoverished Haitians ate mud pies as a way to cope with hunger, but it's not traditional common practice. These mud cookies or mud cakes are made from clay, and while they may offer some minerals, they are not nutritious or a healthy source. They are a sign of desperation during times of extreme poverty and food shortages. This is what we were going. This is what our people dealt with, man. Eating fucking mud pies, man. Eating fucking mud pies. At the same time, they were built 60% of the coffee, 40% of the sugar going to Edomites, man. How does that not fit under the curses, man? All right, but that's what that's going into, man. It's going into the these mud pies, man. Continuing on, it says, and you shall know that I have sent this commandment unto you, that my covenant might be with Levi, saith Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai of hosts. My covenant was with him of life and peace, and I gave them to him for the fear wherewith he feared me, as we got the history, when they drew the swords and slayed their own people, and was afraid before my name. The law of truth was in his mouth, and iniquity was not found in his lips. And now, of course, it is. Now this is their instruments of cruelty, man. All right, it says, he walked with me in peace and equity, and did turn many away from iniquity. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth. For he is the messenger of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai of hosts. Going into the importance of the Levites, man. And that's why, because their falling was so great, man, that's why they are the most impoverished, man. Even after the 2010, I mean, fuck, man. I mean, think about this, man. Even after the French destroyed them, then came the Clintons in 2010. Look at this. Let's do a quick search on that. And Salakia, I didn't want to be too long, but it is what it is. Let's get this. Clinton Foundation accused of what, fraud, Haiti, earthquake, 2010. Let's see what that comes up. Fraud. What? AI. Motherfucking Clinton's fucking even had AI cover up their fucking sins, man. Let's see here. It says, what really happened with the Clinton Foundation? It says the Clinton Foundation has been accused of misuse of funds. I'm not going to go into it. But Trump criticized. Boom. This from January. Okay, right. Let's see what this says. Okay, right. Let's get this right here. From January 2010, $9 billion in international funding was raised. $3 billion from companies, 6 from donors. Of the $6 billion, 9% went to the Haitian government, while 0.6% went to the local Haitian organizations. The lion's share, 90%, went to the non-Haitian organizations, including private contractors, international NGOs, and military and civilian agencies of donor countries. The Pentagon, which charged the State Department hundreds of millions of dollars. So even after the French came in and plundered them, after a 2010 earthquake hit that did 120% damage of its GDP, then the government came in, primarily the Clinton Foundation, and they took 90% of it, man. That's crazy, man. That's freaking disastrous work here. Let's continue to go back on. You have therefore, let's see, it says, but you're departed, you have caused many to stumble at the law, you have corrupted the covenant of Levi, said Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai of hosts. Therefore have I also made you contemptible and base before all the people, according as ye have not kept my ways, but have been partial in the law. And that's exactly what Yahweh Shai, man. He made him the basis of all the 12 tribes. Mud pies, man. To this day, I mean, I haven't heard of people wanting to go to Haiti for vacation. Because why? Because they're downtrodden, man. But I mean, hopefully, this brought some edification. I think I covered all the tabs. So that's the tribe of Levi. Yahweh Ratazal. I do some more videos on the tribes, and until the next one, Shalom.